The other woman looked as though she wanted to say something, but at that moment the doctor re-emerged with the prescription. "Oh, Suhari, when did you get here?" he said lightly. The woman he called Suhari frowned, as if she did not appreciate his tone. She said, "I have come to restock the medicine kept at the guardhouse." She must have been referring to a place within the military camp. Now that Maomao considered it, she realized she had last seen Suhari near the military area as well. At the time, she had felt strangely as if Suhari disliked her. The attitude she saw from the woman now only confirmed her suspicions. Suhari was looking at Maomao as if she wished the young serving woman were anywhere else. If nothing else, Maomao now understood why Suhari had smelled of medicinal herbs when they met. "I have got everything right here." "Is there anything else you need?" the doctor asked. "Not at all, I bid you good day." Suhari met the doctor's very ingratiating tone with near indifference. The doctor looked almost a little sad as he watched her go. So that is how it is, Maomao thought, studying the disappointed doctor and reflecting on how easy he was to read. When he realized she was watching him, he frowned and offered her the medicine. "Does that woman work with the military?" Maomao asked. It wasn't a particularly important question, just a thought she had. "Yes," he said, "though a qualified woman from the outer court doesn't necessarily need to handle that sort of thing." Maomao looked at him expectantly, but the doctor did not explain further. He simply shook his head and said, "It is nothing. Anyway, here is your medicine." He shoved the packet toward her, then gave a dismissive wave of his hand. "Go on, get out." Apparently Maomao had said something she should not have, but exactly what it was eluded her. Was it something a court lady wouldn't normally handle? She repeated this to herself. She decided, however, that there was no special need to worry about the important announcement. Instead, she took the packet and looked inside. There was some kind of powder within it. Wondering what it was, she put a fingertip's worth on her tongue. "Is this potato dust?" She left the doctor's office feeling perplexed. "Do you need anything from the doctor's office today?" Maomao asked, glancing at Suhyun. But the lady in waiting was not easily fooled. "I won't have you slacking off," she said firmly. Maomao mentally replied that she didn't think of it as slacking. She was very eager for even a small sniff of the rich aroma of medicine. Suhyun said, drying her hands on that note, "I gather you have been quietly using our storage room to keep some unusual herbs. I do not want that to continue." She never forgot to twist the knife. Maomao's face twisted into a scowl as she squeezed a rag and wiped the floor. Suhyun was a far more fearsome force than the head lady in waiting of the Jade Pavilion. Perhaps age really did bring wiles. "If you feel you haven't enough space in your room, maybe you could speak to Master Jinchi. We have more than enough rooms here. If you simply ask, you might be surprised how accommodating he may turn out to be." Suhyun sounded unusually cheerful. Maomao wondered if that was true. After all, Jinchi had turned her request for a stable down flat. She said now, "No ma'am. I could never turn a noble's residence into medicinal storage." Suhyun put a surprised hand to her mouth as she took a seat in a chair. "You don't look like the kind who would care, Xiaomo, but you always turn out to be so circumspect. I am only a low-born young woman. No one is more surprised than I am to find me here. I can understand that." But Suhyun looked distant as she gazed out the window. Brief flurries of snow drifted down occasionally. "I urge you not to imagine that those who are high-born are fundamentally different creatures from you. None of us, whether princely or poor, knows what will happen in our lives. That fact alone unites us across every divide." "You think so, ma'am? I very much do," Suhyun said with a smile as she stood up from her chair. Then she came over, hauling a large basket stuffed to the brim with trash. "And now it's time to work, Xiaomo. Could you throw this away for me?" Suhyun wore a placid smile. The basket came up almost to Maomao's chest and looked very heavy. Not just any maid or manservant could be trusted to dispose of the trash in Jinchi's building. There were many people who would eagerly search through it to find something that might give them an advantage. "The way to the trash pit goes past the doctor's office," Suhyun said. "If you simply go past it, I don't mind at all." "That's not a favor, that's torture," Maomao thought with a frown. Nevertheless, she hefted the basket onto her back, wobbling under the weight. Maomao studied the stark indentations the straps of the basket had left on her shoulders, wondering just how much had been inside. Well, at least no one would be able to root through this noble's garbage now. It had all turned to ash. As for Maomao, she could only sigh at this important personage's ignorance. He caused so much trouble for those around him. She was just about to go back when something caught her eye. Is that what I think it is? Not far from the trash pit stood a building. She suspected it was a stable, judging by the neighing of horses. Grass grew nearby, natural and untended. However, not everything there was for eating. Maomao glanced furtively in one direction then the other and dashed over to her target. To someone who wasn't looking closely, it appeared to be simply withered grass. The scent was like a plant wasted by the winter months. If you pulled it from the ground, you would find long roots and a small, unmistakable tuber-like growth. This wild plant was frequently used to flavor medicine. By itself, it wasn't particularly unusual. It was unusual to find it growing seemingly at random among a patch of other grasses. Perhaps there was lots of fertilizer out here behind the stables, Maomao thought, but it just didn't seem like the sort of thing that would normally grow in a place like this. Maomao looked around again. There was a modest hill nearby. A profusion of herbs grew on it and they looked distinctly medicinal. She put down her basket and ran for the mound. She found a field of soft, rich soil. It was brimming with flowers and odd-smelling herbs. These were no ordinary kitchen produce. The plants were still a bit colorless because of the season, but it was more than enough to make Maomao's eyes shine. She was elated and started to inspect each plant, trying to determine what it was. Then, the sound of footsteps, muffled by the soft earth, approached her. A most irritated voice asked, "And what are you doing?" Maomao was still crouching on the ground when she looked back. She discovered a tall woman standing behind her. The woman held a small basket in one hand and a sickle in the other. Sueri, the doctor, had called her. Maomao knew she had to appear suspicious. She decided to try to explain herself, keenly aware that the sickle could come down on her at any moment. "Please, ma'am, there is no cause for alarm. I haven't picked anything yet." "Meaning you were about to, may I take it?" Sugari remained impressively calm. The sickle was not swung at Maomao. Instead, it was set gently on the ground along with the basket. "Any farmer would want to inspect such a fine field," Maomao said. "And what palace is peopled with farmers?" She had Maomao there, but Maomao thought it was a clever line. Where there were fields, there had to be farmers, right? Unfortunately, Suhari did not find this logic as coherent or compelling as Maomao did. Instead, the woman sighed. "I'm not here to hang you by your thumbs or something. This garden isn't technically allowed anyway. A word of warning, though, the doctor shows up here periodically, so I wouldn't recommend making too many visits." She started pulling weeds as she spoke. "So he let you be in charge of this place?" "Sort of. He lets me plant what I like anyway." To Maomao's ears, Suhari sounded notably disinterested. Maomao didn't exactly overflow with enthusiasm herself. It looked like she'd found a kindred spirit. Suhari, though, seemed to have enough social sense to join the other court ladies when they picked on Maomao. "And what do you like to plant?" Suhari looked at Maomao without saying anything, but only for a second. Then she returned her gaze to the ground. A medicine to revive the dead. That was enough to make Maomao's heart pound. She almost grabbed Suhari and demanded to know what she was talking about, but rationality took hold at the last moment. Suhari looked at Maomao and then said the cruelest thing imaginable. "I am kidding." Maomao did not reply, but the devastation must have been clear on her face, because the other woman gave a humorless laugh. "Word has it you are an apothecary." Maomao wondered where she had heard that, but she nodded. Suhari was once again expressionless as she plucked dead leaves. She left any thick roots, trimming the leaves with the sickle. "I wonder just how good an apothecary you are," she said. Maomao, if she wasn't mistaken, heard a barb in Suhari's voice. She looked at Suhari and replied only "Good question." Suhari said, and she stood. "I plant morning glories here every year. It is not quite the season yet, though." Then she collected her herbs and went back down the hill. A medicine to revive the dead, if such a thing existed. Maomao would do anything to get her hands on it. Humanity had sought a means of immortality virtually throughout its history. Could such a thing exist? Maomao believed the possibility could not be ruled out. However, she shook her head at the idea that a drug would simply bring people back to life. She looked longingly at the field for a moment. A part of her wanted to help herself to a little something. Another part knew she shouldn't. They argued back and forth. In the end, the mental dispute only made her late returning. Su-en's discipline was unassuming but severe. Maomao found herself cleaning and polishing right up to the ceiling beams. Chapter 11 Chance or something more. Maomao was cleaning a hallway somewhere in the outer court, as she often did, when she heard a very strange tale. A large figure came up to her, appearing mildly panicked. On closer inspection, it was the big dog Lihaku. "What is going on?" Maomao asked, setting down her cloth. The burly military officer would not have a reason to come to Jinchi's office unless he needed something from Maomao. "No time for chit-chat, there is trouble." And what might that be? If he had come all this way, it must be serious. Despite the way he sometimes acted, Lihaku hardly had time to kill. "You remember the fire at that storehouse?" Later we discovered that on the very same day, a burglary occurred at another location. He scratched his head as he spoke. He thought someone was using the fire as a diversion. Maomao crossed her arms. So that was the story. What was stolen, if I may ask? At that, Lihaku fell into an uncomfortable silence. He tapped her on the shoulder and gestured, apparently wanting to go somewhere they wouldn't be overheard. Maomao let him lead her out of the gallery and toward the garden. Lihaku squatted in the shade of some trees, tapped his finger against the side of his nose conspiratorially and said, "Some ritual implements disappeared." Ritual implements? A very strange thing to steal, Maomao thought. Yeah. Several seem to have vanished, but I'm afraid we don't know exactly what. Lihaku gave a helpless shake of his head. "You don't know what was in there? Was the keeper of the storehouse that careless?" "No, it's not like that. There is no one in charge of the place right now. An important official who had been closely involved with it died last year. That changed everything. It is likely a matter of new superiors rearranging things," someone said. "Perhaps you could ask whoever oversaw it before him then. There is a complication with that as well. He is in no shape to return to work. He came down with food poisoning recently, and he is still unconscious." Lihaku sighed, emphasizing how bad things were. The words food poisoning made Maomao remember something. Hadn't a case of that happened just after the fire? In fact, it happened almost at the same time. "Would that be the clerk who loves food?" she asked. Lihaku's eyes grew wide. "How do you know about that? It is a long story. Could the fire, the theft, and the clerk's illness all be one big coincidence?" It was always possible on some level, but it seemed deeply unlikely. Something else Lihaku had said also got her attention. He had mentioned an important official who passed away last year. She asked what kind of person he was. Lihaku put a finger to his forehead and grunted. "I remember he was an old man who always stood on principle. What was his name? Blast, it is on the tip of my tongue. I know he really liked sweets." "Perhaps you are thinking of Master Kunan," Maomao said, remembering the person Jinchi had told her about the year before. A straight-laced, sweet-toothed official had died from an overdose of salt. "Yes, that was it. Wait, do you know about him too? It's a long story." Lihaku's surprise was understandable. Maomao was not quite optimistic enough to assume all these coincidences could be merely coincidence. Each event looked like an accident when considered alone. However, there were no guarantees that what appeared to be an accident was actually accidental, as the case of the blowfish had proven. Was it possible that all of these incidents were deliberate, aimed at some larger goal? Maomao looked at Lihaku. "I'm sorry, Master Lihaku, but what does this have to do with me?" "Right, that is what I came here to talk to you about." He rifled through a bag and pulled out something. It turned out to be the ivory pipe Maomao had discovered in the burned storehouse. She had given it to him recently, after she cleaned it and rebuilt it. He said he would ensure it was returned to the storehouse watchman, but he still possessed it. "It is not my fault," Lihaku said at that moment. "The watchman told me to keep it. He said he didn't want it anymore. The guard had been dismissed after blame for the storehouse fire fell on him." Maomao had taken the pipe to be a potentially expensive purchase, but evidently it had been a gift. She thought someone had been very generous. He said one of the ladies of the outer court gave it to him. Doesn't that strike you as strange? Why would one of them give something like this to a random watchman? It might make sense, depending on the person. When courtesans received a gift from a particularly despised customer, they would promptly sell it for cash or give it to someone else. But Maomao considered another possibility as well. Perhaps she knew he would want to put such a rich gift to use right away. Not everyone would have that impulse, but many people would, and if that was the mystery woman's objective. She must have guessed how things would happen. The fire would break out and people would come running. Security would be lighter elsewhere, which was the perfect time for sneaking. Lihaku, anticipating what Maomao was about to ask, said, unfortunately, he said he couldn't see the face of the woman who gave him the pipe. It was too dark. A woman walking around in the dark was also strange. Even the palace was not a place where a woman should be walking alone at night. The storehouse watchman had found the woman doing just that. He was kind enough to accompany her out for her safety. She thanked him by giving him the pipe. It had been cold and the woman's face was hidden by a tall collar. He did say that she seemed unusually tall for a lady. He also said that she smelled faintly of medicine. Medicine, do not worry, I know it was not you. He said tall, but I just wondered. Does that sound like anyone you know? Although he might look like a lummox, Lihaku could be pretty sharp. I cannot exactly claim I have no idea, Maomao thought. Perhaps she should simply tell him exactly what she suspected. But then her father's mantra ran through her mind, do not draw conclusions based on assumptions. Maomao thought the matter over and decided on a compromise. Has anything else unusual happened besides the accidents and incidents you mentioned? That sounds like a portentous question, but I wouldn't even have connected this many dots without your hints, Lihaku said, crossing his arms. Are you saying there is something else I should be investigating? Possibly. Or possibly not. Which is it? Lihaku said, exasperated. Maomao crouched down and grabbed a stick from the ground. She used the stick to draw a circle in the dirt. Two things often happen coincidentally. She drew another circle, partially overlapping the first. Three things may happen and still be chance. She added another circle. But don't you agree that at some point, it stops being coincidence and becomes deliberate? She filled in the segment at the center of her three overlapping circles. Suppose this lady of the outer court, if that is what she is, stands at the nexus of these deliberate coincidences. I get it. Lihaku clapped his hands. Maomao thought of Suhari, but she felt that didn't really matter. You're smarter than you look, Lihaku said, clapping her on the shoulder with a huge grin. But you're just as strongly built as you look, Master Lihaku, so please do be careful. Lihaku felt a bit of a chill as Maomao glared at him. He turned around and discovered she wasn't the only one giving him a disapproving look. I'm glad to see you're having fun. The voice was gorgeous but thick with sarcasm. Lihaku took an intimidated step back when he saw who it belonged to. I'm not particularly having fun at all, Maomao said. Jinchi stood watching them closely, half hidden by the shade of the tree. Gaeshun stood behind him, his brow wrinkled in his customary, perpetual expression of chagrin. The big mutt promptly went home, leaving Maomao to deal with Jinchi, who was acting put out for some reason. You seem quite friendly with that man. Do I? She poured tea from a small teapot she had put on to boil. A ceramic cup might have made for a better tasting drink, but most of the dishware Jinchi used was silver. Maomao still wasn't entirely clear on Jinchi's place in the political hierarchy. He was more than a eunuch who flitted around the inner palace. He had real business here in the outer court as well. What is he, some kind of military officer? Indeed, sir, as you could see. He came to talk to me about something that bothered him. Maomao placed snacks to go with the tea on the desk. She could not be completely sure whether Jinchi might have a stake in what Lihaku had told her. After all, Kunan was somehow connected. So Maomao offered, shall I tell you exactly what he was asking about? Jinchi only sipped his tea in silence. When Maomao had finished a detailed explanation, Jinchi closed his eyes and frowned, looking faintly distressed. A tangled web indeed. Yes, sir. Jinchi hadn't touched the snacks. Gaeshun stood by the entrance of the office. She looked as disturbed as her master. And how do you think it's all related? Jinchi asked. That I do not know, she said honestly. She had no idea what any of this had been intended to accomplish. Any of the cases could have been accidental. One thing was certain. As long as they looked like accidents, it was unlikely anyone would put the pieces together. Personally, I think they look less like a single grand scheme and more like a series of traps. The success of any one of them would serve the purposes of the one who set them. Jinchi took another sip of tea in response. The mouthful emptied his cup, so Maomao went to boil more. I must agree, Jinchi said. And that means there is a possibility that there are other traps. We cannot be certain. Even Maomao had only her speculation to go on. If somebody told her definitively that it had all been a series of coincidences, she could only have nodded and accepted it. HMPH. Not feeling too eager about this one, she said, eager, sir. And what then? It is not as if I investigate these things out of personal interest. She simply took note of what was going on around her. The problem was there were too many people, all too prepared to involve her in their own risky business.